Hi everybody and welcome to Heel Heat. My name is George Coles, and on this episode we're doing It Came From the Network. As you've seen in the past months, we've carried a theme for every month. For the month of April, we're going to do Viewer's Choice. And basically, what that means, if you pay attention to the community page, you will see that once a week I'm going to post up a question, multiple choice, and you get to decide an element of the video. For this week, the options were to pick which decade it came from, and overwhelmingly the 1990s won, which I kind of expected. It seems to be the most popular decade of wrestling, other than maybe the right now. So with that, I chose a show that I think exemplifies the late 90s, and that is the very last Clash of the Champions from WCW, Clash of the Champions 35. This was in the heat of the NWO era. This was pre-Starrcade 97. This does happen in 1997, by the way. Sting was still in the rafters. The NWO was running roughshod over the company. The cruiserweights were starting to show a different style and really show some exciting new types of wrestling. It feels like new stars were made all over and older stars just seem to get better and better. That's why I chose to go with this one. I could have easily went to something, New Generation or early WCW or ECW, but I feel this is kind of an overlooked show, so I wanted to bring it up here. If you haven't seen my videos before, I grade the matches on a 1 to 5 scale, 1 being the worst, 5 being the best. So with all that being said, let's jump right into the show. We get introduced to our announced team, which is Dusty Rhodes, Tony Schiavone, and Bobby the Brain Heenan, and I quite like this grouping. I feel like the added Dusty dynamic made the dynamic between Tony and Bobby a little bit better. Bobby famously did not like Tony Schiavone, and Tony Schiavone at times has tendency to be over the top, where how are you going to be over the top when you have Dusty Rhodes with you? I like this combination. We start off the show with a package with J.J. Dillon basically offering Sting to wrestle any member of the NWO, and we see him point to the crowd. You've probably seen this before. It's a pretty iconic moment in the NWO vs. Sting build. He points to a sign that says Sting wants Hogan. We're supposed to get an answer by the end of this show as to what Sting wants to do, which we'll talk about that when we get there, because I think it was a little bit of a flub, but we'll see when we get there. We roll right into our first match of the night. We have Steve Mongo McMichael wrestling Jeff Jarrett for the United States Championship. This was fresh off of Jeff Jarrett trying to become a Four Horseman. Mongo was a Four Horseman. Deborah leaving Mongo to go with Jarrett. So this was a little bit of a feud there, and I actually enjoyed this match. I think that Jarrett was able to pull some good matches out of Mongo McMichael, which I don't want to speak badly of him because he's not doing so well nowadays. But let's just say Mongo wasn't the greatest wrestler in ring. He was a great personality, and he worked well when you could hide him in a tag match or against someone like the skill of Jeff Jarrett. This is a really fun match. Towards the end of the match, Eddie Guerrero comes out and gets involved, which I believe built to a Eddie Guerrero and Jeff Jarrett feud. I don't remember exactly, but I think it was something along that line. Ultimately, Mongo picks up the win here, wins his first championship in WCW. I'm giving this one a 3. I thought it was pretty good. That's followed up with an on-stage interview with Mean Gene Okerlund and Alex Wright. And Alex Wright showed a lot of personality here, a lot of, I guess you could say, charisma. The problem with Alex Wright is, at this point, he has been portrayed as kind of a goof for so long that it was hard to take him serious. And also, he didn't really fit in with the grittier style of the NWO presentation. If he would have came on just a bit later in his career or in the late 80s, he probably would have been a huge star. After that promo, we see Mean Gene Okerlund with the host for Dinner and a Movie, which I forget their names, but it was a popular show on TNT or TBS back in the day, so obviously they did cross-promotion. That's followed up with another, I guess you could say, monumentous moment in WCW history. For someone like me, it definitely was. We get Raven's first match in WCW as Raven, because he had previously wrestled there as Scotty Flamingo or Scotty the Body, whichever version. They're both basically same character. And he's going up against his former accomplice, Stevie Richards. The gimmick of this is Raven's not under contract, so he gets to wrestle with no rules, which eventually turns into Raven's rules. At the time, I remember not liking this And it's not because of Raven or Stevie, it's because Stevie Richards in ECW had broken away from Raven and had broken away from the clueless Putz character, which he went back to here and proved himself that he could be a main event guy. He main evented, well, basically main evented. He was the match that led into the main event of the ECW's first pay-per-view. But Stevie proved that he could be a little bit more than what he's being portrayed as here, which is basically a lackey and stooge and idiot for Raven. Taking that out of the equation, this was a pretty good match and probably my second favorite match on the card. Raven knows how to work a match and how to structure it to make it look good. Even though this was almost all a Raven squash, he didn't make it feel like a boring match. He made it interesting. He included the things that we associate with Raven, the drop toe hold into the chair, the aggression at times, the somewhat nihilistic approach to wrestling. Like I said, this is probably my second favorite match or my favorite match on the card, and you'll see the other one in a little bit. Raven does pick up the win here. I'm giving this one a 4. I almost said 3, but it's a 4. That's followed up with a video for the Ultimate Dragon, which he informs us in the video we've been pronouncing it wrong. It's the Ultimo Dragoon, which eventually turned into Ultimo Dragon because, you know, we could see it on the Ultimo part. That's what he gets. This is a really good package and really something that I wish they would use more of nowadays. Ultimo had already been there for a bit, but you explained his character a little more. You gave this video that gave us more depth, made you care about this guy a little bit more. I wish they would do that nowadays. I wish they would give us packages like this, and not just a debut package, but, you know, just in the middle of a guy's career, show some highlights of him, especially if you're looking to move him into a bigger role. That leads us right into a match. Ultimo Dragon is defending the television title against Alex Wright, and this was fun. This was an interesting match. I think both of these guys' style worked well with each other. Alex Wright with that British style, that European style. Ultimo with the hybrid Japanese/lucha style. They worked well together. And again, like I said, I think Alex Wright was just a little bit too early or a little bit too late, because I think he would have been a much bigger star either in the Ruthless Aggression era or the Hulk Hogan Rock and Wrestling type era. This was a good match. Ultimately, Alex Wright picks up the win to become the new TV champion. I'm giving this one a 3. The other thing that was interesting, and it felt like they kept a lot of the commercials in here because there was like 1-800-COLLECT commercials and stuff of that nature. They had the commercial for the 6 TV shirt, the NWO 6, Scott Waltman, which I always thought was the coolest looking of the NWO shirts, that and the one that just says the Outsiders in red. I thought those were the 2 coolest looking shirts. Those were the two NWO shirts I liked the most. So that was cool getting to see that. That's followed up with a very young Chris Jericho defending his Cruiserweight Championship against Eddie Guerrero. And I kind of expected from the beginning match that Jeff Jarrett might come out and get involved here, but he didn't. This is the other match when I mentioned Raven and Stevie as being one of my 2 favorites here, and this one goes right with it. I'd say they're 1A and 1B because they're different kinds of matches. As you can see with the talent involved here, Chris Jericho and Eddie Guerrero would go on to be 2 of the biggest stars in wrestling in just a few years after this. And it's crazy to see when you look back at WCW, especially this time frame, just how stacked and talented this roster is. I mean, you got guys that were world champions up and down the card. You know, Jeff Jarrett, Raven, Guerrero, Jericho. Later on, we're going to see Ric Flair, Randy Savage, DDP, Lex Luger, Sting's involved in the show. I mean, like I said, a bunch of people that were world champions at one point. This is a really fun match. Ultimately, Jericho picks up the win here. Eddie Guerrero has a temper tantrum after the match, which was kind of the template on how they would make a cruiserweight turn heel back at this time frame. I'm giving this one a 4. I thought it was really good. Speaking of cruiserweights, we get a Lucha Libre match, which involves a lot of the cruiserweights of the time. We have Psychosis, Silver King, Villano 4, and Villano 5 going up against Juventud Guerrera, Super Calo, Hector Garza, and Liz Mark Jr. And this was fun. This was a good match. Probably if I would have watched this in the time, and probably as I was watching it in the time, I would have probably thought more highly of it. But when you go back and you watch the different WCW, you can see this match, or matches like this, on pretty much any card they have. This, to me, was one of the big draws of WCW. That first hour, that 8 to 9 o'clock hour before Raw went on the air, they would try to hook you with these great matches with the luchadors, with Benoit, Malenko, Guerrero, Jericho. You know, a lot of the undercard talent, they would try to hook you with them having great matches, and then right as the 9 o'clock hour hit, the NWO would hit the ring, or Sting would hit the ring, and you wouldn't want to turn to the other channel, which is what their thinking was. This is a fun lucha style match. Ultimately, Psychosis, Silver King, and the Villanos pick up the win here. I'm giving this one a 3. Like I said, it's good, but it's pretty much a match you could see on any WCW event of the time. After that, we go back to the dinner and a movie set. This time, Mean Gene asks them what they're making, and it's all Randy Savage themed stuff, which is kind of funny, which they take off their shirts and reveal that they're NWO chefs, and Savage comes out. Kind of fun, kind of cool. Savage goes off the set for whatever reason, and out comes DDP because they were trashing DDP. This was during Diamond Dallas Page and Randy Savage's feud. He hits a diamond cutter on one of the hosts. A pretty good segment, pretty interesting. People forget how involved celebrities were with WCW. You had stuff like this. You would have Kyle Busch from NASCAR show up, or obviously people know Jay Leno and Rodman and Malone. Celebrities were wanting to be part of this because the NWO was so hot and so cool back then that they wanted to get involved. And I know this is a cross promotion with another Turner-owned product, but even with that, they seemed really enthused to be part of it. That's followed with our next match. We get Ric Flair and Curt Hennig, who was a free agent at this time, so this is prior to the Fall Brawl, the War Games match, where he turns on Flair and the Horsemen. They're going up against the NWO team of Syxx and Konnan, which is very surprisingly a team I forgot ever teamed together. And I know they probably have 1,000 times, I just forgot about it. For some reason, when I think of the NWO in my head, I know Syxx was a part of it, but I don't think of him as to when the NWO ballooned and had 20 members, because shortly after that, he was gone from the company. And that's why I don't think of him being teamed with a guy like Konnan. Even though I know he was there for that, for some reason my brain puts him in the early days of the NWO, not in the mid-point. This is a good match. Obviously, this was meant to sell Curt Hennig and how good Curt Hennig is and what a good free agent signing he's going to be for whoever does pick him up. Ultimately, Flair and Curt pick up the win here. I'm giving this one a 3. Then we get a full grouping of the NWO in the ring for the NWO party. Hulk Hogan's not there. We get all the other luminaries like Buff, Savage, Hall, Nash, Syxx, Konnan, and whoever else may have been in the group at the time, Bischoff. And they're throwing a party for their first anniversary, when this is actually more like their 15-month anniversary. That leads us right into our main event of the evening. Scott Hall and Randy Savage, who are going to defend the tag team championships under Outsiders rules. They're going up against Diamond Dallas Page and Lex Luger. This, again, much like I said with the Cruiserweights, this was kind of your general run-of-the-mill WCW match, and not saying that it's bad. You could see this match on most Nitros. You could see this match on a lot of pay-per-views. This is the kind of match they put together to further storylines. Obviously, Savage and DDP. Luger had issues with the Outsiders, Hall and Nash. Ultimately, the NWO is too much for Lex and DDP. They pick up the win, Hall and Savage do. I'm giving this a 3. We go to commercial and we come back to the final segment, which is the NWO celebrating in the ring again. And then we get a picture of Sting in the rafters with a buzzard, a vulture, whatever the heck you want to call it, which is another iconic shot of Sting that a lot of people think of that image in their head. The lights go out and the vulture goes to the top ring rope. And here's where I think there was a little bit of a flub that I mentioned earlier. Bischoff is looking like he's trying to get something from the vulture or buzzard. I'm not sure what the proper terminology is. I'm not a zoologist, and if I'm saying it wrong, there's probably going to be 15 people in the comments saying I'm an idiot, which I am. I know I'm an idiot. I want to say he was meant to bring a note to the ring which said that Sting wanted Hogan, and you could see Bischoff picks up different pieces of paper off of the mat, and some of them were stuff thrown in by the fans, and he keeps trying to reach out. I think there was a flub there, a little bit of a flub, that either when the bird was handling it, he dropped it, or whatever it may be. But it may lead a little bit of a weird and awkward situation with a standoff with the NWO and this big giant bird. But either way, again, this is the kind of thing that used to end their shows. This is how they would end a Nitro. This is how they would end a Clash of Champions. It kept you interested. It wanted to see what the hell was going on next. Overall, I thought this was a good show. The reason that they got rid of the Clash of the Champions is Not too long after this, Thunder started up, so they had another production going. They had already picked up to more pay-per-views, so the Clash of the Champions didn't mean as much as they used to. Kind of like Saturday night's main event eventually ran its course, so did the Clash of the Champions. I think this was a good way to go out. We got to see what WCW in the height of the NWO era looked like. A lot of the tropes of the NWO era, the party, the different matches, which were all pretty good, the Lucha Libre stars that are brought in, the cruiserweights, the young stars on this card. Overall, I thought this was pretty good. I definitely enjoyed it, and it didn't feel like it was a 90-minute show. It breezed by rather quickly because everything moved at a rapid pace, and there wasn't a point where it became boring or felt dated. It felt like you could put this on right now, and it would hold up against anything you see on WWE or AEW. So for that, I'm going to give this show a 4. I thought it was pretty good and probably better than the sum of its parts. The different segments were really good. The matches were good to great. I thought it was rather enjoyable, and I highly recommend you watching this if you haven't, or if you haven't since it came out, going back and watching it. With that being said, keep your eye on the community page. Later on in this week, you're going to see the new poll, which I won't spoil just yet. You'll get to pick an element of next week's It Came From the Network, and that'll be what we do the video on. If you made it here to the end, throw an NWO for life or Too Sweet down in the comments for me, or just NWO if you want to. Throw that down in the comments while you're there. Smash the like button, share the video, subscribe, all that fun stuff that all the other YouTube people tell you. And with all that being said, my name is George Coles, and this has been another episode of It Came From the Network.